Theosophy is a collection of mystical and occultist philosophies concerning, or seeking direct knowledge of, the presumed mysteries of life and nature, particularly of the nature of divinity and the origin and purpose of the universe. Theosophy is considered part of Western esotericism, which believes that hidden knowledge or wisdom from the ancient past offers a path to enlightenment and salvation. Theosophy comes from the Greek theosophia, which combines theos, God, and sophia, wisdom, meaning divine wisdom. For the late 19th century onwards, the term theosophy has generally been used to refer to the religio-philosophic doctrines of the Theosophical Society, founded in New York City in 1875 by Helena Blavatsky, William Quan Judge, and Henry Steel Olcott. Blavatsky's major work, The Secret Doctrine, was one of the foundational works of modern theosophy. As of 2015, organizations descended from, or related to, the Theosophical Society were active in more than 52 countries around the world. Modern theosophy has also given rise to, or influenced, the development of other mystical, philosophical, and religious movements. Etymology. The term theosophia appeared in the works of early Church Fathers as a synonym for theology. The theosophoi are those who know divine matters. The derived term theosophy was originally also a synonym for theology. However, it acquired various other meanings throughout its history. Traditional and Christian theosophy. Antiquity and medieval ending c. 1450 CE. The term theosophy was used as a synonym for theology as early as the 3rd century CE. The 13th century works Summa Philosophia attributed to Robert Grosseteste made a distinction between theosophers and theologians. In Summa, theosophers were described as authors only inspired by the holy books, while theologians like Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite and Origen were described as persons whose task was to explain theosophy. Therefore, the terms were the opposite of the present-day meaning. In Jewish mysticism, the theosophical doctrinal system of Kabbalah emerged in late 12th century southern France, spreading to 13th century Spain. Kabbalah became the basis of later Jewish mystical development. The Theosophical Kabbalah in Judaism was recast into its second version, Lurianic Kabbalah, in 16th century Ottoman Palestine. For the Renaissance onwards, syncretic non-Jewish traditions of theological Christian Kabbalah and magical Hermetic Kabbalah studied the Judaic texts, incorporating its system into their different philosophies, where it remains a central component of Western esotericism. Gershom Scholem, the founder of Jewish mysticism academia, saw medieval and Lurianic Kabbalah as the incorporation into Judaism of Gnostic motifs, though interpreted strictly monotheistically. At the center of Kabbalah are the 10 Sephirot powers in the divine realm, their unification being the task of man. In Lurianism, man redeems the sparks of holiness in materiality, rectifying the divine persona from its primordial exile. 16th and 17th century. During the Renaissance, use of the term diverged to refer to Gnostic knowledge that offers the individual enlightenment and salvation through a knowledge of the bonds that are believed to unite him to the world of divine or intermediary spirits. By the 16th century, the word theosophia was being used in at least one of its current meanings. Christian theosophy arose in Germany in the 16th century, inspired to a considerable extent by the works of Paracelsus. Theosophy flourished in the works of Egidius Gutmann, Valentin Weigel, Heinrich Conrad, Johann Arndt, and Caspar Schwenkfeld. The term had not yet reached a settled meaning, however, as the mid-16th century Theosophia by Johannes Arborius provided a lengthy exposition that included no mention of esotericism. The work of the 17th century German Christian mystic Jacob Boehme strongly contributed to spread the use of the word theosophy. Even though Boehme rarely used the word in his writings, it is on account of the title of some of his works, but these titles appear to have been chosen more by the editors than by Boehme himself. Moreover, Boehme gave the word theosophy a limited meaning, making it clear that he was not conflating nature with God. There were relatively few theosophers in the 17th century, but many of them were prolific. Outside of Germany, there were also theosophers from Holland, England, and France. This group is represented by Jan Baptist van Helmont, Robert Flood, Jean Portage, Jane Lead, Henry Moore, Pierre Poiret, and Antoinette Bourignon. Theosophers of this period often inquired into nature using a method of interpretation founded upon a specific myth or revelation, applying active imagination in order to draw forth symbolic meanings and further the pursuit of knowledge toward a complete understanding of these mysteries. In Athanasius Kircher's Oedipus Egypticus, Kierkegaard assigned the word theosophy to the metaphysics of the Egyptians and to Neoplatonism, and thus he gave once again the word one of its most generally accepted meanings, that of divine metaphysics. 18th century. In the 18th century, the word theosophy came into more widespread use among some philosophers. However, the term theosophy was still practically absent throughout the entire 18th century in dictionaries and encyclopedias, where it only appeared more and more frequently beginning in the second half of the 19th century. Theosophers themselves used the word theosophy sparingly, at least up until the middle of the 19th century. Johann Jacob Brucker included a long chapter on theosophy in his monumental work Historia Critica Philosophia. He included theosophers alongside other currents in esotericism in what was then a standard reference in the history of philosophy. German philosophers produced major works of Christian theosophy during this period: Theosophica Theoretica et Practica, by Samuel Richter, in Opus Magocabalsticae Theosophicum, by Georg von Welling. Other notable theosophers of the period include Johann Georg Gichtel, Gottfried Arnold, Friedrich Christoph Oenger, William Law, and Dionysius Andreas Freyer. By the 18th century, the word theosophy was often used in conjunction with panasophia, i.e. a knowledge of divine things that is acquired by deciphering the supposed hieroglyphics of the concrete universe. The term theosophy is more properly reserved for the reverse process of contemplating the divine in order to discover the content of the concrete universe. In England, Robert Hindmarsh, a printer with a Methodist background, formed a Theosophical Society in 1783 for translating, printing and distributing the writings of Swedenborg. This society was renamed in 1785 as the British Society for the Propagation of the Doctrines of the New Church, consisting of Swedenborgian-based beliefs. In France, Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin and Jean-Philippe d'Artois Membrini contributed to a resurgence of theosophy in the late 18th century. Other theosophical thinkers of this period include Carl von Eckartshausen, Johann Heinrich Jung, Frederick Rodolphus Saltzmann, Johann Michael Hahn, and Franz von Baader. Denis Diderot gave the word theosophy more attention than other encyclopedias of this period by including an article on it in his Encyclopédie, published during the French Enlightenment. The article dealt mostly with Paracelsus and essentially plagiarized Brucker's Historia. 19th century. Groups such as the Martinist order founded by Pappus in 1891 followed the theosophical current closely linked to the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition and Western esotericism. Theosophers outside of the initiate societies included people such as Vladimir Solovyov, whose views have been described as follows: although empiricism and rationalism rest on false principles, the respective objective contents, external experience, qua the foundation of natural science, and logical thought, qua the foundation of pure philosophy, are to be synthesized or encompassed along with mystical knowledge in integral knowledge, what Solovyov terms theosophy. Common characteristics. Theosophy actually designates a specific flow of thought, a tradition within the modern study of esotericism. Thus, it follows the path starting from the more modern period of the 15th century onward. 5. It describes the theosophic current, or theosophy, as a single esoteric current among 7 other esoteric currents in early modern Western thought. Christian theosophy is an under-researched area. A general history of it has never been written. 5. It noted that there are obvious similarities between earlier theosophy and modern theosophy, as both play an important part in Western esotericism and both claim to deal with wisdom from a Gnostic perspective. But he says there are also differences, since they do not actually rely on the same reference works, and the style is different. The referential corpus of earlier theosophy belongs essentially to the Judeo-Christian type, while that of modern theosophy reveals a more universal aspect. Although there are many differences between Christian theosophy and the theosophical movement begun by Helena Blavatsky, the differences are not important enough to cause an insurmountable barrier. Quote, when referring to the ideas related to Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society, the word theosophy is capitalized. Otherwise it is not. Theosophy and theosophists refer to Blavatsky's philosophy, while theosophy and theosophers refer to Christian theosophy. Some theosophists were also theosophers. Blavatsky linked her use of the word theosophy to the Neoplatonists and Ammonius Saccas, rather than to the later Christian theosophers. Theosophers engage in analysis of the universe, humanity, divinity, and the reciprocal effects of each on the other. The starting point for theosophers may be knowledge of external things in the world or inner experiences, and the aim of the theosopher is to discover deeper meanings in the natural or divine realm. Antoine Fiver notes the theosophist dedicates his energy to inventing the articulation of all things visible and invisible, by examining both divinity and nature in the smallest detail. The knowledge that is acquired through meditation is believed to change the being of the meditator. Fiver identified 3 characteristics of theosophy. The 3 characteristics of theosophy are listed below. Theosophy, divine, human, nature triangle, the inspired analysis which circles through these 3 angles, the intra-divine within, the origin, death and placement of the human relating to divinity and nature, nature as alive, the external, intellectual and material. All 3 complex correlations synthesize via the intellect and imaginative processes of mind. Primacy of the mythic, the creative imagination, an external world of symbols, glyphs, myths, synchronicities and the myriad, along with image, all as a universal reality for the interplay conjoined by creative mind. Access to supreme worlds, the awakening within, inherently possessing the faculty to directly connect to the divine world, the existence of a special human ability to create this connection, the ability to connect and explore all levels of reality, co-penetrate the human with the divine, to bond to all reality and experience a unique inner awakening. Blavatsky and Theosophy, and the Theosophical Society. The Theosophical Society was founded in New York City in 1875 with the motto, "There is no religion higher than truth." Its principal founding members were Helena Blavatsky, Henry Steel Olcott, and William Quan Judge. After several changes and iterations, its declared objectives became the following: to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color; to encourage the study of comparative religion, philosophy, and science; to investigate the unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in man. The emblem of the Theosophical Society includes 7 symbols of particular importance to the Society's symbology. 1. The motto of the Society. 2. A serpent biting its tail. 3. The swastika. 4. The hexagram. 5. The crux ansata. 6. The pin of the Society, composed of crux ansata and serpent entwined, forming together T, S, and 7. The seal of the Society contains all of these symbols, except a and thus contains, in symbolic form, the doctrines its members follow. The Society was organized as a non-proselytizing, non-sectarian entity. Blavatsky and Olcott moved from New York to Bombay, India in 1878. The international headquarters of the Society was eventually established in Adyar, a suburb of Madras. The original organization, after splits and realignments, has several offshoots, all of them except the 3 objectives above, and the precepts put forth by Blavatsky. Blavatsky was influential on spiritualism and related subcultures. The Western esoteric tradition has no more important figure in modern times. Helena Blavatsky was a charismatic, unconventional and controversial woman of mixed Russian and German descent, who had reputedly traveled extensively. She became the major proponent of both theoretical and practical theosophy. Since its inception, and through doctrinal assimilation or divergence, theosophy has also given rise to or influenced the development of other mystical, philosophical, and religious movements. Following Blavatsky's death, disagreements among prominent theosophists caused a series of splits and several theosophical organizations emerged. The formal successor of the original society is as of 2011 known as the Theosophical Society Adyar. After a split in 1895, William Quan Judge established a new theosophical organization in New York City, which later eventually moved to Pasadena, California. It is known as of 2011 as the Theosophical Society Pasadena. The latter split yet again. Another theosophical organization, the United Lodge of Theosophists, was the result, formed by Robert Crosby in 1909. Contemporaries of Blavatsky, including William Quan Judge and Alfred Percy Sinnett, and later exponents, have contributed to the development of this theosophy, producing works that at times expanded on the original concepts. Through the various theosophical societies and organizations, theosophy remains an active philosophical school with presences in more than 50 countries around the world. The World Teacher Project during the 1890s and 1900s. The international leadership of the Society and the Circle became increasingly convinced that the appearance of an emissary from the spiritual hierarchy was imminent. The expected emissary was further identified as the so-called World Teacher Maitreya, originally by Ledbetter, who discovered 14-year-old Jiddu Krishnamurti as the entity's probable vehicle. Krishnamurti was was groomed extensively for his expected messianic role, and a new organization, the Order of the Star in the East, was formed in 1911 to support him in this mission. The project received widespread publicity and enjoyed worldwide following, chiefly among theosophists. It also encountered opposition within and without the Theosophical Society, and contributed or led to years of upheaval, power struggles and doctrinal schism within Theosophy. Additional negative repercussions occurred in 1929, when Krishnamurti repudiated the messianic status claimed on his behalf and dissolved the Theos. Soon after, he severed ties with the Society and Theosophy in general. The adverse reactions and mixed publicity generated by the entire World Teacher Project, and especially by its demise and aftermath, damaged the standing of Theosophy and of its institutions. However, Krishnamurti eventually established a worldwide reputation as an original and respected independent speaker and thinker on spiritual and philosophical issues. Post-Blavatsky and Theosophy and new religious movements. Contemporaries of Blavatsky, as well as later Theosophists, contributed to the development of this school of theosophical thought, producing works that at times sought to elucidate the ideas she presented, and at times to expand upon them. Since its inception, and through doctrinal assimilation or divergence, Theosophy has also given rise to or influenced the development of other mystical, philosophical, and religious movements. During the 2 decades that followed the death of Blavatsky, a number of leading Theosophists expanded or reinterpreted her own and other theosophical works. Prominent among them were Charles Webster Leadbetter, then considered the Society's main occult investigator, and Annie Besant, who became the international president of the Society in 1907 following the death of Olcott. Some of the prolific commentaries and newly introduced concepts became subjects of doctrinal debate and dispute. Dissidents charged them with straying from theosophical orthodoxy and derisively labeled such works neo-theosophy. However, in later usage the term came to signify presumed theosophical or quasi-theosophical thought advanced by people not directly connected to the theosophical movement or its institutions, especially former theosophist Alice Bailey and groups associated with her, and also the people and organizations mentioned below under the heading New Age Movement. G.R.S. Mead was an early theosophist. In 1909 he resigned from the Theosophical Society, which was Orientalist. Prior to his break from the Society, Mead had already begun emphasizing sources from the Western esoteric tradition in his writing. Mead was among the first Theosophists to explicate Western theosophy deriving from Alexandrian and Hellenistic sources in the early centuries A.D. Influence following during the 1920s, the Theosophical Society ADR had around 7,000 members in the United States. According to a theosophical source, the Indian section in 2008 was said to have around 13,000 members, while in the US the 2008 membership was reported at around 3,900. India and Sri Lanka. The Theosophical Society ADR was closely linked to the Indian independence movement. The Indian National Congress was founded across the street in 1885 during a theosophical conference, and many of its leaders, including M.K. Gandhi, were associated with theosophy. However, Hindu spiritual teacher and leader Swami Vivekananda has criticized theosophy and theosophists. Some early members of the Theosophical Society were closely linked to the Indian independence movement, including Alan Octavian Hume, Annie Besant and others. Hume was particularly involved in the founding of the Indian National Congress. The Theosophical Society had a major influence on Buddhist modernism and Hindu reform movements, and the spread of those modernized versions in the West. Blavatsky and Olcott took part in Anagrika Dharmapala's revival of Theravada Buddhism in Ceylon. Anthroposophy. Rudolf Steiner, head of the German branch of the Theosophical Society in the early part of the 20th century, disagreed with the Adhyar-based international leadership of the Society over several doctrinal matters, including the so-called World Teacher Project. Steiner left the Theosophical Society in 1913 to promote his own theosophy-influenced philosophy, which he called anthroposophy, through a new organization, the Anthroposophical Society. The great majority of German-speaking members of the Theosophical Society joined the newly formed Anthroposophical Society. New Age movement. The present-day New Age movement is said to be based to a considerable extent on original theosophical tenets and ideas. No single organization or movement has contributed so many components to the New Age movement as the Theosophical Society. It has been the major force in the dissemination of occult literature in the West in the 20th century. Other organizations loosely based on theosophical texts and doctrines include the Agni Yoga, and a group of religions based on theosophy called the Ascended Master Teachings, the IAM Activity, the Bridge to Freedom, and the Summit Lighthouse, which evolved into the Church Universal and Triumphant. These various offshoots dispute the authenticity of the rivals. Scholarship. Scholar Alvin Boyd Kuhn wrote his thesis, Theosophy, a modern revival of ancient wisdom, on the subject, the first instance in which an individual obtained his doctorate with a thesis on theosophy. It can called also Olav Hammer's and Arnold Kalnitsky's doctoral dissertations. Art, music, literature. Artists and authors who investigated theosophy include Talbot Mundy, Charles Howard Hinton, Jeffrey Hodgson, James Jones, H. P. Lovecraft, and L. Frank Baum. Composer Alexander Scriabin was a theosophist whose beliefs influenced his music, especially by providing a justification, a rationale for his chromatic language. Scriabin devised a quartal synthetic chord, often called his mystic chord, and before his death Scriabin planned a multimedia work to be performed in the Himalayas that would bring about the Armageddon, a grandiose, religious synthesis of all arts which would herald the birth of a new world. Quote, "This piece, Mysterium, was never realized, due to his death in 1915. Leonid Sarbaneyev, in his book Reminiscences about Scriabin, wrote that the Secret Doctrine and Journal's Bulletin of Theosophy constantly were on Scriabin's work table. Scriabin reread the Secret Doctrine very carefully and marked the most important places by a pencil." Artists reported to be theosophists were Vasily Kandinsky and Pete Mondrian. Blavatsky presented her book, The Voice of the Silence, The Seven Gates, Two Paths, to Leo Tolstoy. In his works, Tolstoy used the dicta from the theosophical journal Theosophische Wegweise. In his diary, he wrote on the 12th of February 1903, "I am reading a beautiful theosophical journal and find many common with my understanding.